All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting, which is being held here at Medway on Tuesday the 7th of June. We start off with apologies for absence. We know we have them from the Leader of the Council, Councillor Jarrett, and also from Councillor Rodney Chambers. I don't think there are any more. No, thank you. You have in your papers the record of the decisions which were made on the 10th of May. Do you accept those as a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you. The next item is the disclosure of pecuniary interests and other significant interests. And I've no doubt that, well, first of all, I'll declare mine, which of course I'm going to present later on, the 6-month progress report on the Medway Development Company, and therefore I rely on the dispensation which has been issued some time before. And I think that you also need to have, don't you, Adrian, have your interests noted in the same way as being a director of MDC.
That's correct, Deputy Leader, with the same dispensation from the Councillor Conduct Committee. Thank you.
Right. Are there any other declarations? Right, thank you very much. Then we'll come on to item 4, which is the revenue and capital budget outturn for 21-22, the year that finished at the end of March. And you will see there as a general overall comment, we were, when we made the budget originally, expecting that because of all the pressures on us, we would have to take some £4 million out of reserves. The good news is that that actually now we are showing a surplus instead of 3,911,000, and I think that really is it means that that not only have we not drawn on reserves, but any deficit this year of that magnitude can be covered without any serious damage to reserves. So I think that's really very good. Having said that, of course, we'd much rather not have to use any of the reserves, but for anything. But I think that it does mean that we've got away that year without using them. The real stumbling blocks, if you like, on them, or the real highlights, if you like, according to your point of view, we've obviously got continuing pressure on children's care. I think every council in the country is having that problem, which I think Councillor Isles has been, and Councillor Potter have been trying very hard to keep that down to the minimum, whilst at the same time making sure that the children are properly cared for. And there's a similar state of overspend, really, on, although it's a smaller amount, on the adult services. And I know Councillor Brake has been keeping his eye on those. And again, it's the same sort of reason. We seem to have, I suppose, going through a pandemic doesn't help with family life and so on. But I think it does actually mean that we've had to work extremely hard, or those portfolio holders have, in order to make sure that those deficits didn't escalate to a point where we couldn't cope with them. The good news is, of course, that Norse, which half the surpluses come to this council, but they have made a double the amount they expected to make. They've made, instead of 500,000, they've made £1 million, which I think is extremely creditable, really. And most of those savings are achieved by real efficiencies. They're not simply not doing the job. So I think that's also. I'd also like to pay a compliment to the officers as well, because I think they've done extremely well in helping us, particularly in areas like waste and so on, where by making the contracts, and you, of course, Councillor Filmer, will know about this, but we've actually saved a great deal of money on that. Well, the way we now do that through Norse, and also. The other thing, which I think has been very commendable, is that people are coming back to the leisure services and to all the other customer services like parking and so on. Those things are coming back they're not there yet by some way, but they are actually rather stronger than we thought they would be when we made the budget originally, because you don't go through a COVID pandemic where everybody thinks it's safe to stay at home as far as they can and then expect to take the same money home on gyms and everything else that you run. So I think that's really the moral there. So it's been a very complicated year in the sense that we've had lots of different grants from government and with very little time in which to distribute those, but with strict regulations on how they are to be distributed. And so one way or another, that's meant a terrific pressure on officers and on some portfolio holders. And I think that we've risen to that very well. So I recommend this budget to you. Part of that budget is all part of the budgetary report is also the writing off of the irrecoverable debts that we have of some 33,000 and 47.01. So if anyone wants to contribute the 01, they're welcome. But in all seriousness, would you now please, I'll move the recommendation which is contained in section 15, which is to note that the revenue and capital outturn position for 21-22, and secondly, to agree to agree that the debt in the value of 33,047.01 be written off against the Council's debt provisions as set out in section 9 of this report. And I'd like to emphasise the fact, although it's obviously there are more important matters here than that particular thing, that it isn't just a question that we blithely write off money like this. We made quite vigorous efforts to recover it through every possible means. And we always are looking for ways in which people pay their debt, because what they don't pay falls on everybody else. So I think that we have done an awful lot of work. I know that Phil Watson and his team have worked hard on this, and frankly, we've got as far as we can go. So I think we have no choice but to write those off. So I commend those recommendations to you and invite anyone who wants to make a contribution. Not to the deficit. Okay, Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Yes, I think all those been involved in finalising this budget have been congratulated. It's a fantastic position to be in at the end of the year, not only to have been within budget, but also to have had a slight surplus which we can carry forward. We've had numerous reports over the last 12 months where the position was far worse than that. So, and sometimes it looked almost impossible to achieve, but we have achieved it, and I think it is a fantastic effort. But you were right, I think, Deputy Leader, to put a caveat on that, that we may need that surplus next year, because certainly through my job of chairing the procurement board, it's becoming obvious that input costs are very much on the rise for the services and goods that we have to buy in on behalf of our residents. The cost of materials, as everybody knows, is going up, but there's also severe shortage of people who are available to do jobs. So some of the people that we are negotiating contracts with are having to pay higher wages in order to get people in. It's good that people are well paid, but we've got to accept the fact that that puts our budget position under pressure. And I think in the next 12 months we will have an equal struggle as we've had over the past 12 months. We will have an equal struggle over the next 12 months to balance the budget. Well, things are not going to get easier for us. So whilst this is good news, the bad news is we can't let up our efforts of keeping all our costs under control.
Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. I'm pleased that Medway North can play a part of putting extra money back into the budget. As you rightly said, it's not through cuts on Medway North, it's more about working smart. On the waste side of things, the cost of the recycler has gone up, so that's helping things on that. And it's good to see that our car parks are busy again, so people are starting to use the shopping centres more, and they're getting back to a somewhat normal situation. So the figures we're predicting on the car parks are increasing, so that's good. So hopefully we don't get any more problems, and the budget will be better this year.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Chitty.
No, sorry, I was...
Thank you, Deputy Leader, and thank you for introducing this report. If I may, please, I'd just like to home in on adult social care and
Yes.
public health, but in particular to highlight the fact that there certainly was a worsening of the overspend, which has in fact been partially brought under control, but sadly, whereas year on year adult services have continued to contribute greatly to cost savings by very good management on behalf of the team that look after adult services. Certainly COVID had a negative impact on so much that we do, to the point that in the days where our own local hospital, Medway, was very keen and anxious to clear beds in order to bring more patients in for COVID treatment. What that meant, in fact, is that, in short, the National Health Service took over the responsibility of sourcing bed spaces around our care homes across Medway. Now, up until COVID, now we're COVID relaxing an awful lot in with regard to the provision. What has happened, in fact, is that, or the system is that anybody being made ready for discharge from Medway Hospital is actually picked up and looked after by adult social care, and working together with the hospital to make sure that a full care program is in place for each and every person to be discharged. Now, because of what was considered to be a national and indeed local emergency, as I say, the NHS took control of the procedure that is now back in place, and we found that any bed that was available across Medway was in fact being picked up and used, which is really good that the care homes were prepared to accept these people coming into the care homes. The sad thing is, though, that without any thought or deliberation or communication or consultation with us as a local authority, our local hospital were prepared to pay whatever price care homes wanted. And that really contributed greatly to the problems that we now have today, in as much as that now things are getting back to normal. Local care homes just cannot understand why we as a local authority can't pay the same as the NHS were prepared to pay. So sadly, this is something that we've got is a burden to us at the moment, and we're having to work very hard, not only with the local hospital, but equally with the care homes to bring them back on course. I'm sorry, but we cannot print money just to pay the bills for care homes, and that is a big impact and something that we're having to deal with. And forgive me if I sound very strong on the words that I say, and I'm sure this won't please Medway Hospital in what is being said, but the truth is this has been said to Medway Hospital, to them, in public, so I make no apologies for having to say this again at a cabinet meeting today. So we hope to get back on track, but we're going to have to live with what we have at the moment. Equally with public health, now it's been mentioned in here that public health have contributed a great deal to helping with the grants that have come into Medway Council, and you can take it from me, Deputy Leader, that the money has been spent well and been spent wisely to make sure that the Medway community has in fact been looked after. And the number of volunteers that have come from the appeals and the support, that it really has been an absolute credit to our public health team, which of course is an absolute credit on Medway Council. And I felt that I had to mention those two areas because they are important to us all. And finally, if I can say that the bad debt that is also mentioned in the adult social care area, where there was a debt of something like 33,000 and that 1 pence. Never quite sure where that came from myself, actually. But this is something that is being investigated fully to make sure that we do not finish up in a situation similar to that in the future. Thank you.
Gary, Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I'd just like to say that I think it's worth emphasising that, in fact, our reserves are actually going up by nearly 8 million this year, because we were funding the budget with over 4 million plus the 3.9 that we've saved. So we've actually put a lot back into reserves this year, and a lot of that came from regeneration, culture, environment, business support and centralised services. So it's worth thanking those departments for their efforts in saving us the money to bolster up our reserves for this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Yes, I would just like to address the deficit on the children's services budgets, or overall budgets. As you can see in the report, several of those named did come in under budget, but of course the ever continuing challenge of placements gives us this enormous overspend, which I can only comment on as to say that as part of the improvement journey, the officers and staff are doing everything that they can to mitigate that overspend, but it is a national situation as much as anything else, but that should not be an excuse for us to try and actually remedy that position. It is disappointing that we underachieved the budget savings, and again that is work in progress, and I will ask for this to be reviewed going forward. So by and large that is the situation, but I can say that we are still in our improvement journey, and you know, everybody is so focused on getting the service right and being able to afford the service, and that's something that we need to establish as well. So going forward, it will be business as usual, work in progress on the budget outturn. Thank you.
Well, can I thank all my all the cabinet for their contributions here, and I do think that we ought to just say that I think that you've all worked extremely hard to get to this budget, and you've been backed up by a superb officer team, and I hope, Neil, that you will take away with you the appreciation of the cabinet for all that they've done, because we were not in that position even at the end of Q3, and we've now turned that round, and I think that that's not been done without pain, if I put it that way. So I do think that's great. I think you're right. I think Councillor Hackwell says is right, that actually you know, we have effectively managed to be 8 million better off than we thought we were in terms of the outturn figure. But of course, it's the 4,000 we were going to use isn't going to be used, and the 3.9 will be used already, I think, or likely to be used against the budget for the year that we're in now. But nevertheless, that's still a very healthy position when we considered where we thought we were at the beginning of 21-22, and that didn't happen by accident. And we've always got to remember that with the pandemic going on, with the effect that has on so many bits of the council, in other words, the council has to do more and gets less in, if I can put it bluntly, then I think that that I think is very well managed, and I think that certainly I think the public should know that we have those services, I think, very well under control, and we use them where we are. But I do agree with the remarks that Councillor Brake made about the question of the cost of individual placements in care homes and so on, because you know, you can't just fix it by throwing money at it, because you make the situation intolerable for everybody else in the sector, and I think that really is becoming quite a difficulty. You know, solving one problem and creating three, so isn't a very clever thing to do at all. So I therefore would like to just you to confirm that you accept the recommendations in section 15, and we'll then move on to the next business. Are we all agreed? Thank you. Now, I'll call now upon Councillor Jane Chitty to present the item 5, which is the Maidstone Local Plan Review, where this council is required to provide a statement of common ground. And perhaps you'd like to explain the background to that and what it means.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Deputy Leader. Not only this present government, but previous governments have put together requirements that all local authorities have to follow in putting together a local plan. These requirements are very clear, and if they were ignored, then certainly any local plan would not go forward to an inspector because they wouldn't apply. Now, part of the disciplines that are laid down is a discipline called a requirement to work with neighbouring councils and to have proper, significant discussions in relation to the local plan. Now, Maidstone Local Plan has come forward, and immediately there was, we could identify what was a very serious problem in relation to Medway, a very substantial development, and this would impact on every service within Medway, whether it's education, whether it's children's services, whether it's adult services, whether it's highways. The implication is very, very serious indeed. And so therefore, we immediately responded and made very clear, very deep concerns in relation to their proposals. Now, we're absolutely entitled to do this. In saying that, we also have to be very sure that we can uphold those objections. And I think it's, and I know colleagues around the table this afternoon have a great deal that they'd like to say in relation to this. So it is a challenge that we have to face, other authorities clearly will have to face, and we are perfectly within our rights to make strong representation and to defend our interests in relation to this. But I'll keep it very brief, Deputy Leader, because I know so many of colleagues around the table wish to make a contribution.
Well, I think you see the problem, and I know I assume there are so many facets to this particular problem, and the problem being not the statement itself, but the fact that it's effectively proving to be a dialogue of the deaf, because basically Maidstone, I don't think, really worry too much about what Medway thinks of the 2,000 homes they want to put on our doorstep in Lidging. But what I think is so disgraceful about that is that actually when those homes go in, they will have a tremendous effect on the area, and particularly on the ward which I represent and Councillor Hackwell represents. And I think that's not been taken fully into consideration, and it's very difficult to believe that neighbouring authority cares. So this idea of cooperation between authorities won't work if it's a one-way street. And I think that what has happened is that because Maidstone is mainly concentrated, if you like, quite away from the border with Medway, the heart of Maidstone, they actually don't mind this being right at the periphery of where they are, so much at the periphery that they cannot virtually get off the land without going into Medway. And when they come to Medway, the strain on the services, which I'll leave you each to speak about, is actually, I think, very painful, and has extremely deleterious effects. People think that it's just a question we don't like the houses. It isn't. It's a question of what it does to all the other services that are available to the residents that we serve in Medway. So I'll throw that open now to the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Leader, and I agree, accept and recognise the situation here, but my main concern is obviously from an educational point of view. We need to be mindful of Medway Council's future housing developments. I therefore should inform Cabinet that the Lidsing Garden community development's close proximity to Medway would undoubtedly put an increased pressure on the Council to also provide, in the main, sufficient secondary school places to meet the potential demand imposed by that development. The need to provide primary school places is, however, according to our report, limited due to the Lidsing development including a 3-form entry primary school. But bearing in mind that parental choice cannot be ruled out, the Council could face a degree of pressure in providing primary school places as well. Notwithstanding the addition of free schools and our school place planning strategy, Medway itself will be faced with an increasing demand for school places as its own future housing requirements are met. Currently, Medway secondary schools are already large, and careful consideration has to be given to any potential expansion to avoid affecting the quality of the school's educational provision. Adding the demand for school places from another borough, regardless of the external funds provided to do so, would have, in my opinion, the potential to compromise that careful consideration process that we have in place, and indeed our own requirements. Thank you.
Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. In the same way as my colleague Councillor Isles has picked up on children's services and education, I equally feel that I should pick up on, in particular, health issues. I've been through the report and the Appendix 3 document that's been tabled to us today, and as hard as I may try, there is no specific mention made anywhere relative to health provision. Lots has been said about proposals that Maidstone believe that they can contribute with regard to highways and waste disposal and a whole range of things which looks at the peripherals of what is required in a development, much of which is failing in so many areas. But when it comes to health, this seems to have been a word that has been missed out of the report in its entirety. And I think you'll forgive me, Deputy Leader, if I just take Cabinet back just a few years as to how we have reached where we are today, in as much as that a few years back, through the NHS, a sustainable transformation programme was introduced. The idea being that we would be looking at NHS and health right across the whole of Kent and Medway to ensure that we were going to have a plan that could move forward for the future. Now, part of that programme involved our Chief Executive, Neil Davis, was part of that, the board that looked at the STP. We had the Director of Public Health, the leader of Medway Council, and myself as the Chairman of the Health and Wellbeing Board for Medway. From the Health and Wellbeing Board, it was decided to create a joint Health and Wellbeing Board that encompassed both Kent and Medway, with the view being that while the STP was being considered and gone through, that we would have an oversight of the impact across Kent and Medway. And of course, Medway, as you can imagine, Deputy Leader, contributed greatly to the discussions, really to ensure that Medway was not forgotten in any of the proposals or indeed decisions that could come out of the discussions. Now, from that was created 4 health and care partnerships, and that covered the whole of Kent and Medway. So we had West Kent, we had East Kent, but more importantly, I'll concentrate on the one health and care partnership, which is Medway and Swale. Now, before I go any further, I'll just highlight that in that Appendix 3, paragraph 2, it actually states Medway is surrounded by the Kent District Councils of Ashford, Tunbridge and Moorland, Tunbridge Wells, Swale and Medway Council. Medway borders Maidstone Borough Council, Swale Borough Council to the east, Tunbridge and Moorland Council to the southwest, Gresham Council to the west. The Thames Estuary forms the northern land boundary of Medway Council. That is to be found on page 6 of Appendix 3 that is attached to the supplementary agenda item that we have. Now, makes it very clear who our neighbours are. If we then look at page 7, we see this lovely map that shows Medway Council in yellow, Maidstone Borough Council in green, and Swale Council is put out on a limb and is just white. Well, it seems to me, and is very clear, that Maidstone seem to have forgotten all about any form of health provision that may be required for its population of Maidstone and any expansion there may be to the population of Maidstone. Because what has happened is that the NHS and Kent and Medway Integrated Care Board, as I mentioned, has created the 4 health and care partnerships, and Medway has been linked with Swale. And the 2 organisations, the 2 authorities together, do in fact make an ideal number, a sizable amount. The number is just right to be part of that integrated care partnership. So if you take the population of Medway together with Swale, it's been very carefully worked out, put them together, we've got the ideal size. Nowhere has it ever been discussed that, well, we may have a little bit of an overspill from Maidstone, that, well, it's got to go somewhere. Maidstone are in fact tied up with West Kent. That's their integrated, and that's their health and care partnership. They're over to the west, leaving Medway and Swale to get on with business. And if you look at Medway and Swale, you'll see that, or you're aware that there is the Medway Foundation Trust, the Medway Hospital, which is located here in Medway. And in the same way as the population of Medway consider Medway Hospital to be theirs, our hospital, the people of Swale equally believe Medway Hospital to be their hospital. They do not associate themselves with Maidstone. The mere mention of, say, well, why can't the Swale people just pop off down the A249, I think it is, and head into Maidstone, fills them with absolute horror. No, they say. We have Medway on our doorstep. We are part of the Medway Hospital area. So that's the way the people of Swale believe and think about Medway. So there is still a very, very close working relationship. But of course, Swale is all part of Kent, which is why with the Kent and Medway Joint Health and Wellbeing Board, it was interesting that we had the Kent representation sitting with the Medway representation, and I'll stand corrected, but on all the meetings that I ever attended, never once did I hear anybody talk about, well, how are we going to look at the overspill of Medway, who's going to look after them. That's Maidstone's responsibility, it's Kent's responsibility. Now, I put this down as a background because in addition to that, we've only got to look at where we are when it comes to primary care. Primary care across Kent and Medway, we have 46 local primary care access for 100,000 people. That 46 should in fact be 50, which appears to be the national requirement. So we're already short when it comes to the number of GPs and local practices that we have that can support today the population of Medway and I'll put this in as well, of Swale. But if we just concentrate on where we are today in Medway, we haven't got enough to look after ourselves and our existing requirement, let alone having to look after another sprawling proposed development just over our borders into Maidstone. Now, all of this, of course, impacts greatly on where we are here in Medway today. Can we afford to look after these additional people. Another interesting fact that I would like to share with the Cabinet, and that is that some 3 years ago, Medway, together with its public health team, made a decision that we would support the Chatham Medway Medical School that is located in Canterbury. Now, just so you're aware, this particular provision, a medical school, was put into place where it was able to pick up on young people who perhaps hadn't quite reached the required standard or level in their A-levels to go to medical school direct, because they may have had perhaps they were underperforming in one of the requirements for health admission to university. What the Chatham Medway Medical School does, in fact, is to pick up on these young people and to concentrate on the areas where they need help and support. But they don't just leave it at that. They also pick up with the schools where these young people came from, and they work with that school to improve the standard in that particular field such that more individuals can in fact find their way into medical schools. Now, I mention this because Medway and our public health team, we've contributed to so far 3 bursaries for young people to go into the Chatham Medway Medical School in Canterbury. The idea being that we are making a direct contribution to future GPs that we hopefully will be coming back into Medway to work for our community. So we're doing our part to make things better. We're also having a significant input into the CCG wanting to improve and encourage doctors into the area. And Medway has joined a scheme where we're able to give support and encouragement for GPs to come to Medway to live, to work and to enjoy a Medway life. But these will be people that will be working within our communities. That's the whole idea. So Medway, we are well ahead of the game. We know what's wanted, we know what's required, and we're doing our part to deal with it. But nowhere in this report does Maidstone even mention health. Are Maidstone prepared to contribute to what we're doing here in Medway? I very much doubt it. They haven't even thought about it yet. So they've got a long, long way to catch up on what is required. Deputy Leader, I'm going to leave it at that, but I sincerely hope that members have got an idea as to where we are today with health. Thank you.
Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Brake has gone into great detail about the health implications of Maidstone, but there's lots of others as well. All the services that will have to go into the so-called Litzing Garden Village will have to come from Medway. That will include the police, the fire service. Our police services in Medway are already quite overstretched, although we've had a significant increase in policing numbers in Medway. We've also had the Medway Task Force come into Medway. But every time they get a call that some incident is happening in Medway, they have to prioritise it as to which ones that they go to. The only place that this area can be served from is from Medway. So unless there's a significant increase in policing cover, Medway will suffer. Our fire service will be overstretched. I think this is really a blatant attempt by Maidstone to solve their housing numbers at Medway's expense, and I'm delighted that the officers have managed to make our reply somewhat more robust. And I think that was the concern at our last cabinet meeting, that it wasn't sufficiently robust. This I think is a lot more robust. It will help us because this will have to be one of the documents. I think I'm right. Councillor Chitty will correct me if I'm wrong. That this is one of the documents that will have to be presented when Maidstone put their local plan to the inquiry. And I do believe most firmly that we have got to make sure that at that inquiry that we make ourselves robustly known as well. You know,
Okay.
this is a pure imposition by Maidstone on us. It's to the entire detriment of Medway and our people. And you know, we have got to stop this. And as has been said, this isn't a case of NIMBYism. Not at all. We all want good quality housing for people, but what we don't want to do is have that at the expense of Medway's services being overstretched. Thank you, Deputy Leader.
Sir Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start to say that, you know, Medway is the largest conurbation in the southeast outside London, and we have a green lung, the Capstan Valley, which people constantly want to build on, and we've been protecting it for as long as we can. We need that green lung to provide us with the environment. We've got an environmental crisis here in Medway, and we need that green lung. In fact, if you look at although I understand this is a legal requirement that we have to have a statement of common ground, I'm totally opposed personally to this development in Lidsing. I've even made personal financial contributions towards the action group that are fighting it. So I was brought up very close to this area. I know it very well, and it just can't. Medway just cannot deal with the 2,000 houses dumped on our doorstep that Maidstone won't be paying any attention to. In this document, it talks about we're going to get Section 106 money from the developers, and that's all Maidstone care about. That they think that they'll ignore this, they'll build it nowhere near their town, and everybody will use our services. The proposals also include a new road in my ward, mine and the chairman's ward. This new road is in an area of outstanding natural beauty in our ward, and I just don't understand how this development can go ahead. We in Medway are very opposed to it, and I hope the parish council that are fighting the fight locally from Bredhurst will continue to fight and will fight it in the examination in public, which will happen later on this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Leader. As colleagues have stated, this Lidsing proposal will have a severe impact on Medway education and health, police, fire services, the impact on the landscape and the green infrastructure of the area. Now, we were absolutely right at the last Cabinet meeting to ask officers to make our common statement, common ground, more robust, to ensure that those objections and those concerns were very explicit throughout the document. Now, that has led to a bit of a spiky response from Maidstone in a number of areas. I would say in some areas there is a lack of respect for Medway and our concerns, and there's, it's fairly evident in the document. They also try to water down some of those concerns and dismiss some of those concerns rather naively. And I think the one that perhaps sticks out most prominently is on page 13, where it talks about Medway's objections and concerns will be addressed through developer contributions and on-site provision. Well, anybody who has had a development near them, and any councillor will know that on-site provision and S106 contributions rarely meet the actual need generated from a housing development, let alone one as large as this. So that's just one example there of where this proposal really does not stack up. And at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is Maidstone dumping on Medway and essentially limiting the life chances and putting something forward that would be detrimental to the quality of life of our residents, and we are going to fight that all the way.
Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. I'd just like to touch on the transport and the road network. I see that they've done a stage 1 modelling, but to be honest, our officers would really like to see the stage 2 modelling and the impact it has on Medway, because we all know what the roads are like out there. We've got the addition of extra traffic coming through the Lower Thames crossing, so junctions on the M2 are going to be difficult. So we would welcome any view of the modelling as soon as possible to give our assessment on that. I also note that the water supply and treatment is looking at coming downstream to Medway for us to supply the water. So really and truly, don't think Maidstone are being really fair with us at all.
Councillor Chitty.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Firstly, I wish to thank you for allowing such comprehensive input from Cabinet colleagues, because these proposals affect every single one of them and the work that they do, and how we try to respond properly to Medway and its residents. Now, we can split this into two areas. One is the detail which has been discussed this afternoon, and which I absolutely totally agree with, that the principle of concern. I would have to say, perhaps pick up on something Councillor Potter said in relation to 106. 106 really only comes into operation at the end of a major phase or the end of a development, so that isn't part of any argument that we could put forward legitimately. Now, what actually are our rights and duties as related to these papers? In no way does this give, these papers or the recommendation, give any tacit approval to Maidstone and their proposals. I think it's really important to emphasise that. Secondly, how will we be reacting to this? Well, we are reacting to it very clearly. Immediately we became aware of Maidstone's requirements. We sent, the leader of the council sent a letter immediately voicing his concern and his objections. And also, as the process moves on, we will be having various different people responding to our concerns. We will have barristers, we will have planning experts, we will have as many of these as necessary to put up a real defence for Medway's interests. And it is about Medway interests. Now, we do have a duty to cooperate, and I think that, you know, any manner of means we can comply with that duty to cooperate. But in saying that, it doesn't mean that this authority would actually roll over to a planning part of somebody else's local plan that would have such severe input into how Medway actually functions in the future. As has been said, we are a very large conurbation. We do not have large areas of open space, green space, and certainly we do have some green belt which we've dedicated to preserving, and areas of special interest. So we are in a very, very difficult position, that the housing figures that government have put onto Medway are so substantial. We are under very, very severe pressure, and there is no way we could absorb somebody else's requirements. It just isn't possible. So what do the recommendations actually say? As I said previously, in no way does this give any tacit approval to Maidstone and Maidstone's plans. So the recommendation in 10.1 I don't know whether, Deputy Leader, you wish me to read it.
No, I don't think that's necessary. I think we've got actually the recommendation that you need is obviously in the second supplementary agenda, and is on recommendation 3, section 3.
Indeed.
And so I think which basically means that we approve the content of the statement of common ground and delegate authority to the Director of Police and Deputy Chief Executive in consultation with the leader and yourself, Councillor Chitty, as portfolio holder for planning, economic growth and regen, to make any amendments necessary following discussions with Maidstone Borough Council to finalise the statement of common ground for signing and submission and examination of the Maidstone local plan review. That's where we are, and I think the main point that we need to get over, and I think you've heard it articulated much better than I by my colleagues, but basically I think Maidstone's got to get the idea, and so have local people, who I've never seen in such a state as they are over this development. It's terrible. It's not only thinking in terms of 2,000 houses, you've got to think, if you think even in terms of 2.5 people per house, another 5,000 people you're chucking in. And you've got to remember that this area in Rainham and Hempstead has taken an enormous bashing over the years with new development. You know, I mean, I don't mind that to a certain extent because I originally was part of the first phase, but way back. But you know, we have done our bit. We've done an enormous amount. And I think people are now saying, well, look, you know, when you get to a certain point, you erode your quality of life. You know, there's no, you know, another 5% ruins it for the other 95%. And that's where we are going. Because I think the strain on our shopping, the strain on our general, on our GPs and so on, because we know that a number of them anyway are retiring and so on, and it's a great strain there. We know that there will be a lot of strain on our shopping areas and so forth. You know, you can't just keep on adding it in, and the transportation proposals, which involve another link into the M2, frankly, well, let's just put another link into the M2. Doesn't work like that. It costs you millions to do that, and when it does, you're going to actually disturb the people within Medway, not just disturb them, but uproot them quite ruthlessly in order to do it, because I can't see that they're ever going to be able to do it without a very great cost in human suffering, if you like, although because the area is basically very built up. So one way and another, I think we need to get it home as well to Maidstone, which as Councillor Chitty has said, but also to those in the community who are sometimes uncertain how far, because we have to send letters, we write strategies, etc., etc. It's all part of the system. But what we need to get across to local people, and we've asked specifically that communications give attention to this, we have to communicate with them at every single stage. And the message we give them is this: we are right behind you with this. We oppose this development. And as far as I'm concerned, we go on opposing this development because I think it's the most awful and cynical piece of manipulation I've seen for years. And it means that what it amounts to is you take all the pain, we take all the council tax income, etc., etc. You know, we may give you some 106 towards doing this or doing that, but actually you'll have to have it anyway and make the difference up. So good luck, lads, you know. And I've never, the old expression of blow you, Jack, I'm all right, really applies to this. And I think it's an appalling attitude, which I think makes people cynical sometimes about local government, is this type of decision. And I think it's absolutely awful. And I'm pleased that you are showing that unanimously. And I'm just hoping, against hope, that they realise that we will fight this all the way that we can. So, you know, we are right behind you, and you'll be getting statements from us at various points in time showing how we are backing up local people in regarding this development as an appalling crime on Medway, which I think it is. So can I take it that you all support that recommendation in section 3? Thank you. I'm sorry that took you a rather long time, but it's a very important issue. We'll now move on, please, to splashes, which I hope will be a more cheerful outlook. The situation here is this: is that we have got to we originally provided £5 million in the estimates for last year in order to we thought refurbish the old splashes. When we actually did some detailed investigations into the substructures and so on, it was found that really it was quite incapable of being renewed at any viable level. Or to put it very crudely, the old building had it, and had it in spades. And so I think that what we then realised was there were two alternatives. We either leave all those people in that area without the facility they've enjoyed for so long, or alternatively we provide a decent facility and do it properly. And I think the members of the Cabinet and members of our group all decided that it would be a much better idea to rebuild, and then we come on to methods. Well, what we've done is we've already used part of the £5 million to demolish the old splashes, and that's been dealt with and adequately protected. And next phase is obviously to, we would normally say, we go out to tender straight away. We wait for the result of the tender and the analysis of those tenders, and then we go to council and say, having got our costs fairly well fixed, we then say, okay, would you please let us have the money? Now, unfortunately, in the world we're in at the moment, costs are moving very fast, the game is moving very fast, and we won't give you cost certainty up to that point when you accept the tenders. And all you're going to do is delay it without achieving anything if we use what is the first of the options in this paper, i.e. to wait until all the tenders are in before we actually ask for the extra resources. It's timing of committees, etc., etc. Now, we've said and declared publicly our intention to get on with this at pace. And so what I'm asking you to do today is to agree that, in fact, you will recommend to the full council an addition of 12.85 million, which brings up that added to the residue of the 5 million is enough to carry out this development. We will then, if that is successful and the council agrees, we will immediately go out to tender. The tender papers, I gather, are pretty near ready, and they go out, and we then, as soon as they're back, what we are going to do is to then get ahead with the project and get some spades in the ground fast. And that really is what I think we owe the people of that area. And I think that we really do need to do this. So I think you've got all the reasoning in this. I hope I've sort of cut it down to what I think is a fairly simple proposal. And that is that we need to press ahead with the new splashes. We need to ask for that 12.85 million, which is set out in 10.1 of the report. And also, can I just make the point, as I have to since I'm responsible for the climate change response, to say that we have actually appointed a design team that has extremely extensive experience of delivering energy efficient sports centres. And one of the things that will happen is that the new centre will use half the energy of the old centre, which are pretty good, I think. Things like rooftop voltaics, air source heat pumps, recycling, and so on. I think that we can achieve a much better model. So this, I think, is something we really need to do, and I ask you to support that recommendation. Thank you. Councillor Chitty.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader. Over a very long period of time, we have undoubtedly continually voiced our support for the splashes to remain, whether it was in its former guise or whether it will be in its new guise. And I absolutely support the recommendation, because what we want is for splashes to come into operation, to be a facility that actually has significantly or will significantly upgrade the provision and give those residents who are close and even those a little further away the opportunity to take advantage of what will be a really splendid provision. And so therefore my main concern and interest is, come on, let's just get on and get it done. And if this is part of it, then so be it, and I fully support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Chitty. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. I was very pleased when the plans were announced last month, going forward to planning. I want to thank you for listening to me, for taking on all the feedback over the years on what people would like to see with splashes, and for listening to the community as a whole. And I think it's brilliant that we're going to have the 2 swimming pools. So we've got one dedicated for the lane swimming as well as the leisure provision. The swimming pools are going to be both around 25. The lane swimming certainly 25 metres, the other one around 25 metres, but it has different sections to it. We've got the wave machine, we've got the flume, we've got the beach area for the young children. So we're delivering what we had with splashes, but perhaps making it what it always should have been. Because I think we can all agree that the original splashes was somewhat compromised with the the small changing area and the afterthought with the cafe and the rest of it. So I'm delighted with what's coming forward here. I think it's the right way to go with option B, so that we can get a speedy delivery of the project and go out to tender and get that construction started. And I think something that should be said actually is that there was a news report just a few weeks ago that I think around a third of district councils in the country are having to consider closing swimming pools and leisure facilities. So for us to be in this position here in Medway, I think we've got to commend our officers, particularly our finance officers, in that we have a well-run council where we can actually do these things and deliver these big projects, not just for Raynham, but a facility for everyone in Medway.
We are looking at different ways of actually providing that energy, such as the research we're doing into the water from the Medway and so on, and the turbine. So anyway, can I bring in Councillor Isles first?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I 150% plus support this, and I'm absolutely thrilled that we are going to have this state-of-the-art centre. For me, it just adds to and delivers on our aspiration for child-friendly Medway, but in this case it also incorporates the family as well. So it's a win-win situation, and I'm absolutely delighted, and actually agree with Councillor Chitty when she said we need to get on with it.
Councillor Galvin, then you.
Thank you. I think this is going to be a fantastic project. It's certainly been a very interesting one to work on alongside our capital projects team, and I thank my colleague Councillor Potter for the comment he's just made, because by and large our capital projects team have been brilliant in bringing schemes in to cost and on time, almost without exception. And some of those projects over the last few years have been very, very complicated indeed. And I think they do deserve praise because they beaver away in the background. We all see the fruits of their work, but they don't. I don't believe they get the recognition they really deserve. One of the reasons why I think this is going to be so good is because it's longevity and energy efficiency have been in the plan right from the beginning. The reason why the original splashes deteriorated was that the principal building material was mild steel. Well, you just can't think of a worse environment to put mild steel in, a place that's warm and damp, a swimming pool. The new facility is going to be primarily concrete and laminated wood, materials that will be much, much better able to cope with those damp and wet and warm conditions. I'm also pleased that it's going to be built as near as possible to what they call passive house standards. Passive house is zero energy input, but we can't quite get to that. But with, as you've said, Deputy Leader, with air source heat pumps on the roof, very, very efficient boilers, photoelectrics, water recycling from the roof. The energy and sort of carbon efficiency of the building is going to be really, really superb. And from a technical point of view, this has been a fantastic project to see the team working on. I'm glad we're putting forward the funding now, so we can really get a move on with it. And the next thing, I'm really delighted that Councillor Brake and I will see this going through the procurement board to get the work done. I'm sure that David and I will join me in really looking forward to that. Thank you, Deputy Leader.
Councillor Brake.
Thank you, Deputy Leader, and thank you for presenting this report this afternoon, which is not full of water, but it's full of interesting facts, figures, and all the information that we need in order to make a decision. In fact, you could say it hasn't been watered down in any way, shape or form. Sorry, I just couldn't resist that one, Deputy Leader. But no, this really is an interesting and worthwhile project, and like all of my colleagues, I've followed it from the day it was indicated that we'd reached the end of the life of the old Splashes Sports Centre, and it was a swimming pool, and there was a need to pull it down and let's start again. And this is a golden opportunity. Of course, it must be remembered that whilst its location is to the east of the borough in Rainham, it will obviously attract local people to Rainham, but equally people are from across Medway, and I believe it is very important that we do make sure that everybody across Medway does in fact understand that this is their swimming pool and is our swimming pool here in Medway for us all to have it and to enjoy it. But of course, from a health point of view, this is again a golden opportunity of encouraging so many people to take up swimming. Swimming can not only be improvement on health, but it can in fact be life-saving, not only for the individual who has learnt to swim, particularly children who learn to swim at a young age, but equally the opportunity of perhaps saving somebody else's life because you've learnt to swim and you've learnt life-saving. So there's so many plus points in this whole report. I fully support and endorse the recommendations, and thank you, Deputy Leader.
Can I thank colleagues for the support with this, and in doing so, may I just confirm that you accept the recommendation in section 10.1, which is that we recommend full council to approve an addition of 12.85 million to the Splashes redevelopment scheme in the capital programme to enable development of the new Splashes Sports Centre. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Well, we now come on to the Levelling Up Fund, round 2, and I call upon Councillor Chitty to enlighten us all.
Oh, I don't like the sound of that. It's very difficult to be explicit when it comes to some of the government's opportunities that they put before us across the country. And so one of the actual challenges is understanding what, oh dear, what, somebody's vote of no confidence there. One of the challenges is understanding precisely what does levelling up mean. And it is a challenge because government do give broad guidelines, and to try to understand right down to the minutiae of what is available in terms of funding is very difficult. I'm delighted to say that our officers have become very specialised in this art form, for indeed that is what it is, and to understand where any funding relating to levelling up can be made available to the benefit of people across Medway. Now, Councillor Chambers is exceptionally good at identifying this, and so therefore we have understood, and the details are within these papers, which I'm sure you've read, that there are areas under the Levelling Up Fund that we can try and access funding. Now, what is required and what the recommendation is seeking is the Cabinet is asked to approve the 2 Levelling Up Fund business cases for submission to the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. The Cabinet is also asked to agree to delegate authority to the Director of Place and Deputy Chief Executive in consultation with the Portfolio for Strategic Regeneration, Inward Investment and Partnership to finalise and approve the business cases for submission. Now, the second paragraph is extremely important because, as I indicated a second or two ago, that there can be adjustments made that need to be made just to make sure that any finalisation document that goes through is compliant with what government is seeking. So to allow officers and Councillor Chambers to be able to do this is a very quick response, and these have to be in by the 6th of July. So there is a very sound reason for that to take place. I'll be delighted to respond to any questions. I may not be as knowledgeable as Councillor Chambers, but I think that we all understand the importance of actually accessing funding where it's available, and this is very much part of the overall tack that we would very much wish to do, not only now but also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader, and thank you, Councillor Titty, for that excellent introduction. I think both the business cases for the Luff 2 bid are very, very good. The Innovation Park, Medway, is going to be a fantastic scheme, particularly providing business and commercial accommodation of a very, very high standard. But that's sort of balanced in a way by the other two. The Greenway project for Gillingham, I think could be a really, really boost, because this is being done in New York, if I recall many years ago seeing it, where there's a stretch of old railway in New York, part of the subway system that became surplus, and you've got this. Well, the only way to describe it is a linear park, isn't it? A long, thin park where you can walk right across the rooftops almost for quite a long distance, and it's all green, and there's street art and there's street performers and all things going on up there. It's really made what was a sort of redundant industrial object, which is actually, we've got a disused section of railway into an active part of the community, and I think it neatly falls into Councillor Brake's area of providing area right in the city centre where people can take exercise and get fresh air and go into greenery. That's a really fantastic project. And the other one that caught my eye was the High Street MT property activation scheme, which again I think is going to have huge benefits for Gillingham. We are CPOing number 6 Gillingham High Street, which is a property that's been derelict for many, many years. We've got our eyes on other similar properties in Gillingham as well that need to be brought back into commercial and indeed residential use again. So I think that both of these business cases are very strong ones. They're good ones, and I'm optimistic because our officers, as Councillor Chitty said, have got, along with Councillor Chambers, have got a brilliant reputation for getting this funding in.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. I just want to touch on one that Councillor Gelvin spoke about, the Greenway. If anyone knows this, it will be fantastic to go from Gillingham down to the dock. Like you say, it's a disused railway line, and the views up through there are really fantastic. I spent a lot of time down there when we were doing St Mary's Island, decontaminating it, and we used to go through there, and you know, from the active travel point of view, it's fantastic. If we can get people on cycles or walking down through there, and now with people, not many people don't have a dog now, so they're looking for places to take their dog for a walk. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Welcome that 100%.
Okay, shall we wrap that up?
Yes, if I might just make a couple of comments. I think it's really important to note that the actual funding that we're seeking is supporting across the board. It is very important in relation to the IPM, the southern site. That is about employment, it is about business, it is about growing the opportunities there. But as colleagues have already said, the other element is to improve opportunities both socially and within high streets. So it isn't just a single focus. We still very much look to any funding that is available is funding that will benefit across the board. And so therefore, the recommendations as laid down on 10.1 and 10.2, I would seek approval from Cabinet. Thank you.
Well, do you all accept that we move ahead with the recommendations and agree those recommendations in 10.1 and 10.2? Thank you very much. You're all levelled up. On to the 6-month development company, Medway Development Company report, and as I'm chairman, it falls to me really to give that report. Basically, the news is very good. I think that first of all, the scheme on Garrison Point, which is 115 flats and apartments behind the Brook Theatre, between Brook Theatre and Fort Amherst. That's coming up very well. It has excellent views from it, and the actual quality of the units that's been provided is really good. And I'm very pleased to tell you that poor old Councillor Golvin spends most of his time signing his life away on all the various contracts for individual flats or apartments. But the great thing is that we now have some 50% of the scheme reserved, and a number of those going past and have gone past exchange, and we have already one completion. And that all those things have been achieved firstly from a look at the plans, mostly, and the show house having only just recently been commissioned. So that is coming up fast, and we think that'll be certainly here within this financial year. That should be very good. Alongside that, though, just to keep ourselves amused while we're doing that, we're developing the waterfront, the Chatham waterfront, which I think will be the linchpin of the city centre that we intend to create in Medway. And you'll see there that the blocks are going up quite steadily. It's a site that needs very careful financial management because the costs of developing that site are high, and that, of course, will have to colour our future contracts as well when we're dealing with an area where labour costs and material costs are tending to spiral, and where, with the uncertain future, with regard to financial future, that seems to be the order of the day for the country as a whole, a number of people are wondering, well, you know, do I dare commit myself to this when I don't know what my future is going to be? So, but I think that having said that, there's a downside to that, an upside to that, which is, of course, that people are either downsizing into smaller units and may want it for that purpose, but also the fact that we have a number of people, perhaps in Docklands and so on, that want to come out of expensive accommodation into slightly less expensive accommodation. But when you bear in mind the views you get from that, from the towers that we built, they really are going to add a quality to the city centre. We've also taken a look at Mountbatten House, which will be the third of the city centre projects. And at the moment, we're taking that fairly calmly because we don't want to actually put so much money out at risk at any one time. But I think that what we're doing at the moment is taking out asbestos. As best as we can, I suppose you might say, but sorry. But anyway, we are doing that, and then we will be getting on with actually modernising that block. In fact, it's stayed vacant, the upper part, for far too long, and people regard it as an eyesore. Well, they won't regard it as an eyesore when we're finished with it, because it'll be an iconic building. It'll have a decent-looking lift up the side, a glass lift, and we'll put a cafe on the top, all part of the plans, or rather a restaurant, I should say, on the top. I think one way or another, this is going to be a place that's really going to take off when we actually do that. That is early days. We made considerable progress with Britton Farm Street and the development there. The ground floor was the old supermarket in Gillingham. That has now been refurbished and let to the NHS Mental Health Trust. And they're well settled into there, and I think they think highly of the accommodation, as do I. We've also actually got from the building fund and other sources, we're actually well underway towards opening the what used to be called a further education centre, but in fact is going to be a skills centre, because it will not only have the ability to run ordinary further education courses, adult education courses, but actually what it will do, we hope, is to enable people to start up businesses in the area and add materially to the prosperity by giving them the skills they need to achieve that. And that's why we're working closely with the Skills Board to actually make sure that we do have that dimension to it. As well as all that, we're also building some affordable homes, and there are some 40 odd affordable homes which are now we're actually getting off the ground doing that. So one way and another, that is going extremely well. We report regularly into the council, obviously. The Assistant Director of Regeneration comes to most of the meetings, and indeed the finance department of the council also actually help us quite materially to make sure that everything we do is under control, because after all they are lending us the money with which to do this. So I think the council can have every confidence, frankly, that this organisation, Medway Development Company, has got off to a terrific start. I think that it has to discipline itself to make sure that we concentrate on that we deliver the projects and don't simply have a go at doing sort of 6 or 7 contracts all at once and then mess them up because we're overbound. We're going to make sure that we do this in a proper and reasonably measured way so that we achieve the sales that are needed. And we are strengthening the management of Medway Development Company by bringing in some sales, a sales expert at a high level, and also we are also bringing in someone who can help with the feasibility studies that we can do on the other schemes that you think you might want to do in the future and want to give to Medway Development just to actually do the feasibility to find out whether what you're proposing is reasonable. Now, I think that, against the shifting sands of the market, I think is a very good performance, but I would say that, wouldn't I? But it is actually giving, we're seeing as you look out of the windows at the centre, you can see a completely new city centre actually coming into being. When the paddock layout is complete, a very, very nice city centre, and one that we as an emerging city can be really proud of. So therefore, I'd like you to note the progress that's being made, as it says in section 9, and also to note really the additional benefits that Medway Development Company, which has brought forward the First Homes pilot bid, which has been very helpful to us in moving some of the units as well. Because it's quite an incentive to have 25%, I think it is, off the price, and to actually know that you can that will get you into your first home, and the more it can help people to get their first home, that is something that's really worth striving for, I think, because so many people out there want to buy and can't afford it, and this does actually this scheme is going to cover that gap, bridge that gap, not breach, bridge that gap. And I think that we have performed, I think, very well with that, and it is likely that we will have further allocations. We've already had one, I think, but we are going to get further allocations of from that fund, because as is seen with the bids that we were talking about in the Levelling Up Fund and so on, it's seen by government that Medway delivers. We don't do what we don't actually piously say we may one day get this and take the money and then realise you can't do it, as happens a lot elsewhere. But what we're doing is quietly delivering all this, and I think that you will see the benefits in years to come. Thank you. Comment from anyone? All right, Councillor Chitty and then Councillor Goldwyn. And then Councillor Filmer.
One of the important factors when you start to regenerate an area is the time element that comes into play. It can't be done immediately. You cannot get immediate results. But what you do have to do, and what you can do, is very definitely have and I hate using this word, have a vision, an overall vision of where you're actually going. And it isn't just, for example, in Chatham, you look across, and Britton Farm, I think, is a super example of what was considered to be an eyesore, an entry point into Gillingham, and very disappointing that it had been dormant for so long. And Prophets of Doom said, well, there's nothing that you can actually do with it. Well, of course there was something you could do with it, and that's been proved by the work that's been done. You cannot be fazed by what we can't do, but seek the answers to what we can do. And the overall vision is so important because it will carry through 5, 10, 15, 20 years to get to an end point, and then the aspirations will get even higher. So therefore I think that people in Medway can actually see the progress from the starting point, which very few people knew about or understood, but coming into fruition. And I think that that is something to be commended, should be recognised, and should also give a real sense of belonging to Medway, because that's what it's all about, Medway. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I think you gave an extremely good, comprehensive summation of the report, and Councillor Chitty emphasised the importance of regeneration in all this, which is a very important factor. You mentioned the fact I've spent a considerable amount of time signing sales leases, which is a lovely thing to be able to do. I did 2 more this morning. That now means that we've sold over 50% of the units at Garrison Point, which, considering we've only had a showroom open for about a month, I think that is really, really good progress. Interesting also, the 2 contracts I signed this morning, one person came from Hempstead, just up the road, and another person came from Headcorn. And I've got to say that this rather belies the urban myths that goes around that any new development in Medway is almost entirely going to go and house DFLs down from London. That is not the case. Of the sales contracts that I've signed over the last few weeks, well over 50% have been people living here in Medway, the majority of them having their first home. Of the remainder, it's probably evenly split between the rest of Kent. We've had quite a number from Essex coming down, so obviously the only place is not Essex, it's Medway. So we've got people coming, and yes, there has been a handful from London, and we've had one from overseas. We had a couple from the United Arab Emirates probably, I should imagine, I don't know the details, but probably expats wanted to come back home again. You mentioned Mountbatten House, you mentioned the asbestos. It's not a huge problem, the asbestos, but it's got to go. Unfortunately, the time Mountbatten House was built, and this building, looking up at this ceiling above us, I wouldn't mind betting if you tested that, you'd find very small quantities of asbestos in there, and that's what we're doing. But we're also taking out the air handling units in Mountbatten House, the lifts, the electrical equipment, and the plumbing. So there's a huge amount of work to be done, as you're right. Slow, steady progress being made there to strip it back, and then we can start the new build. You're absolutely right with the first home stuff. I've been told that Medway has been the most successful area in getting out first homes bonuses to new buyers. So much so, as you said, Deputy Leader, we've been offered over another £2 million for Garrison Point for first homes, which is really good news. It's good news for people who are going to get their first home, and it's good news for the development as well. So I think that's really, really good. The other little bit I can mention, on the waterfront, one of the things that we've got to deal with is the old Rats Bay pumping station. We spent a lot of hours talking about how can we disguise it, paint it, green it, or what we're going to do with it. But we had a very good meeting last week with Southern Water, who are very much on board to make a feature of it. So we're going to open up all the boarded up windows on the pumping station and light it inside, so people can actually see the works inside, how the Archimedes screws are driven by the diesel engines, and more generally the principal of Mid-Kent College tells me he can get his students to make a model Archimedes screw. So we can have a model Archimedes screw in front of the pumping station, so our young people can learn a bit of engineering and science and have a go at turning the handle and see how the thing actually works. So it's a little step towards our child-friendly city ambitions as well. So I think it's a fantastic report. I really, like you, Deputy Leader, recommend it to colleagues, and looking forward to 6 months' time when hopefully we'll have even more progress to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. I'd like to congratulate you on the building, the company itself, because in the short time that you've been doing this, what you've achieved is very, very, very good. Everyone thinks it's a piece of cake building houses. High rise, well, there's a saying, you can't price for what you can't see. So when you start digging in the ground, whatever you think the cost was, that can be triple. So what you've achieved is really, really good. I think people will be they'll be assured now, reassured if you like, from what you've said about being cautious on the way forward with the building company. Very important, especially, we don't know what the market's very strong at the moment, but 6 months' time, we don't know what it's going to be. So what you're saying about not getting pulled in different directions, it was the same when we started Medway North. The amount of work we had to cope with for the council was as much as it could cope with. And all right, we perhaps had a bit of pressure on us to pull in more outside work to bring in more money, but it wasn't practical because the staff wasn't there. And when you get more staff on the building side, you can take on different projects comfortably. But really and truly, I think you've done an amazing job. Well done.
Then can I ask you then to agree that recommendation? And those are in section 9, namely that you note the progress and also the additional benefits that we brought forward as MDC, specifically that first home pilot bid, which has enabled additional affordable housing provision and helping first-time purchasers, which I think is very important, to acquire their first home. Are you all agreed with that? Excellent.
Can we also reassure
Right, we now come to item 9, which is the appointment of the Cabinet Advisory Groups. And can I draw your attention to the supplementary agenda, which does refine some of the committees, because this is a working document, and really ask you to agree, first of all, and this is on page 23 of the supplementary, to agree the re-establishment of the Cabinet Advisory Groups with the terms of reference that are set out in sections 3 to 8 and appendices 2 to 7 of the report, and the establishment of the High Needs Block Recovery Advisory Group and the Medway Youth Justice Partnership Board as new Cabinet Advisory Groups as set out in appendices 8 and 9 of the report, and also the appointment of members to all these bodies as set out in the revised Appendix 1 to the addendum report for 2022-23. Do you agree with that? Thank you very much. Sorry.
I'd just like to draw attention to page 25 and the list of membership under Corporate Parenting Board. A correction needs to be made. And it is my substitute, which is stated as Councillor Thompson. This was changed early on in the boards, by the board, to replace Councillor Thompson with Councillor Potter.
Right, okay. Well, with that, that is the only change, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that amendment, do you agree the recommendations? Thank you very much. And now we come on to the procurement commencement, which is, of course, the Medway Adult Substance Treatment, Harm Reduction and Recovery Service. It's a tall order for you, David. Councillor Ray.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader. The current contract value for substance support services in Medway is running at £2 million per annum. Now, in December 2022, 2021 I should say, the government published a new 10-year drug strategy from harm to hope on the back of Dame Carol Black and her independent review for government. Additional funding has been made available to local authorities that is ring-fenced for substance misuse treatment services. Now, the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities will oversee the use and impact of the additional budget and are prescriptive on what the funding can be spent on. The focus is on reducing drug-related deaths and increasing numbers in treatment by some 20%. Now, the funding comes with a significant number of commissioning quality standards that we will need to demonstrate, and we have embedded across Medway partners, including the police, the probation service, and housing and health. Now, as can be seen in the report, if we turn to page 111, it actually gives details of the supplemental substance misuse treatment and recovery and the costs over a 3-year period from 2022 to 2025. And as can be seen, is a significant sum of money. In addition to that, there is the inpatient detoxification grant, which is again significant in its sum, and all of that, in fact, is additional to what we already have funding to us here in Medway. Now, the tender for the new arrangement of services and interventions will include an integrated adult substance support service delivered by one provider, which provides prevention, treatment and recovery services in proportion to local need. There is an emphasis on cooperation, co-production, service delivery and development with peers that have both lived and living experience. There are also a service that is community-based and engages those at most risk of harm, for example, prisoner release, street homeless and hospital discharge. And of course, what is important is an effective partnership with all of these organisations. Now, the effective substance misuse support service will contribute towards a reduction in crime and antisocial behaviour, reduced rough sleeping, support Medway Council early intervention services, support families, reduce domestic abuse, and many others. The young people services are separate from adult services and form part of the CAMS contract. Now, the key finding from Medway Substance Misuse Health Needs Assessment 2021 shows there's been an upward trend nationally in deaths from drug misuse, and the reported spike that started in 2011-2013 in Medway in particular has settled back, but we remain just above the England average. Deaths specifically from alcohol use in Medway are below the England average. However, there is an increasing trend. Now, whilst we can look at that and say, well, there's a good sign there, I always take the view that one death is one death too many when it comes to substance misuse, whether it be alcohol or drugs, or indeed when it comes to suicide. One death is always one too many. The relationship between drug use and crime has been well established, with approximately half of all homicides and acquisitive crimes relative to drugs. Now, the recommendations are to be found on page 122, and just for clarity, I'll read them out, and it asks for the Cabinet is asked to note the report and approve the commencement of the open procurement procedure as per the preferred option identified in paragraph 6.2.15, which of the four options available, option 4 is the preferred option, which is an open procurement process, and this gives the option for the commissioners and providers to provide flexibility to adapt the contract if required. I won't go into all of the details because it is in fact outlined on page 118, section 6.2.14. I'm happy to take any questions, of course, Deputy Leader, but the recommendations are as I've outlined.
Is that agreed? Councillor Belvin, you want to talk about this?
Yes, I just want to make a comment and support Councillor Baker this, because it's really good news that we've got this extra funding to work with drug users and people with alcohol problems here in Medway. In paragraph 3.7, there's quite I believe, a frightening statistic. The current estimates for opiate and crack cocaine users here in Medway is 1,459, of which an estimate of 59.2% are not in treatment. A very large percentage of Medway's criminal activity is fed by drug addiction. Drugs are very expensive, and people who are addicted have to resort to crime to fund their addiction. And I think it's a shame that we do not take recreational drug use seriously. Those people who think it's a smart thing to do to sniff crack cocaine on a Friday night in a pub loo, they think might think it's a smart thing to do, fashionable thing to do. Firstly, that's the first step towards living in a shop doorway, because that's where a lot of those people who are rough sleeping started. They started off being decent, hard-working people. They end up in a shop doorway, dependent on drugs. The other thing is, there's a trail of crime that just doesn't go back from Medway to London. It goes right across the world. It goes to Central America. It goes to Afghanistan. A trail of crime, criminal activity, and all the side effects that go with that, with countries that are totally disorganised because the drug barons have virtually taken over the countries, and that's a particular problem in Central America, for instance. So we've got to redouble our efforts it's not fashionable, it's not good to take drugs recreationally. It should not be decriminalised. Whilst, yes, it may, by decriminalising it, it may make things easier on the criminal justice system, but the damage it would do to our health services and provision is enormous. And, you know, that is the thing. And for those who come to me and complain that there's drug dealers in my ward, what are you going to do about drug dealers in my ward? Well, the first thing I tell them is, please tell your residents if they didn't buy the drugs in the first place, the dealers wouldn't be there. And they're not dealers, they're couriers. Dealers set prices. The couriers are basically young kids, often very much abused, disadvantaged young people that these gangs latch onto, and those kids are forced into delivering the drugs. And these days they're not even paid to do it. They're tricked into doing it because the gangs make sure that they get to lose the drugs or the money. Then they're dependent on the gang in order then to pay them back, which they have to. They're told they won't get any money. So, you know, these kids are abused, and it all starts with somebody thinking it's a nice thing to do to have a sniff of coke, you know, and then it leads on to what Councillor Brake's been talking about, the enormous cost and facility that we have to provide millions of pounds here in Medway. Sorry to have a rant on that, Deputy Leader, but it's something I feel extremely strongly about.
Right. Can I take it now that you all agree that recommendation, or have you forgotten what the recommendation was? That's all right. It's only pulling your leg, sorry. Right.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Yes, I'd like to move this recommendation. It's on page 138, and it is to recommend to the Cabinet agrees to award the contract to the bidder outlined in section 3.2 at the exempt appendix. Now, there's been an awful lot of work go into this, a lot of hard work. It's been through the procurement team, and this will probably be my last chance to publicly thank Sarah for doing this, but not just doing this and the contract, for the amount of work she's put in over. I think I've worked with her probably for 20 years or coming up that, and I wish her well down in Wiltshire, and I really, well, she's got one or two going away, so I dare say I'll get a chance to. But yeah, quite. So I move the recommendation at 9.1 on page 138. Thank you.
Are you all agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item will be the exclusion of the press and public. We don't need to do that. So our meeting is clear.
Well done.
Thank you very much indeed for your attendance and for your cooperation. Thank you.
Well done, Howard. Yeah, great job.